To our 11-story high mate-demate device located over here before we take it to one of our orbiter processing facilities also located off here to the side.
Now, right across the river from the Kennedy Space Center is the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, where we launch a lot of unmanned rockets. Included in the stable of rockets that they have over there are the Titan and the Delta and the Atlas, all very, very good old rockets. But our main concern today is going to be the space shuttle, so let's go ahead and start talking about that. Now, the space shuttle, what you folks oftentimes refer to as the space shuttle, is what we call the orbiter. The orbiter is just one of 4 components that make up the entire space shuttle. You have the 2 large solid rocket boosters, the white things on the side, and you have that big orange external tank right there in the middle, and then hanging off the external tank is the winged orbiter, which is where the astronauts ride up and down and when they're up in space. It amazes me to think that in just 8.5 minutes we take this whole space shuttle, which at launch weighs about 4.5 million pounds. We take that, and in 8.5 minutes we go from 0 to about 17,500 miles per hour and about 80 miles in altitude and about 1,000 miles downrange. Really an incredible ride if you're sitting on top of this rocket. Now, let me give you a quick tour around the outside of the orbiter.
Now, it takes a lot of time, a lot of people, and a lot of work to get an orbiter ready to go fly. I'm located here in OPF Bay 1 right now underneath the orbiter Atlantis, where they are preparing for the next flight. Now, what you see above me are some of the 25,000 unique individual tile that we use on the orbiter to protect it from the heat of re-entry. Now, in some of the cooler areas, like along the top of the wings and the sides of the payload bay, we can use these cooler blankets that you see right here. But here on the bottom of the orbiter, you see an awful lot of these big black tiles. With me here is Dave Flowers, who will tell us a little bit technically about that tile.
Hey, John. The black tiles on the orbiter are used to protect the orbiter from roughly 2,400 degrees Fahrenheit during the re-entry phase. They range in roughly 1 inch to 4 inches in thickness, and in order for us to glue them to the orbiter, because the aluminum structure expands and contracts at a different ratio than what the tile does, we use a felt pad that we glue to the tile and then glue that to the aluminum structure of the orbiter.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it. As Dave alluded to here, during the re-entry, these tile can take up to 2,400 degrees, but the skin of the orbiter is made of a very unexotic aluminum. It will begin to stretch and anneal at around 350 degrees. So what these black tile have to do is dissipate somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,700 to 2,000 degrees of heat in order to protect the aluminum structure of the orbiter during re-entry. Now what we want to do is go upstairs and look at some more of the orbiter. Other parts are getting prepared to go fly, such as the cargo bay. Now, we're located up near the forward portion of the orbiter, looking back into the cargo bay and towards the aft. What you see behind me is some of the prep work that must be done. Now, every single payload that we fly on the space shuttle has different electrical, mechanical, fluid, and data connections. So after every mission, everything is stripped out of the payload bay, and then we put all new stuff in to adapt to whatever the new payload is you're flying. Now, what you see behind me, you have one payload bay door open and the other one closed, is a very unusual configuration. We're in the middle of doing some very intensive inspections on board this orbiter right now. Now, downstairs, we were talking about the black tile and how they can take 2,400 degrees. Well, now we're located along the leading edge of the wing of the orbiter, and here the temperature can exceed 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So we need a special material here called reinforced carbon-carbon, or RCC, this gray panel you see beside me. You see RCC located on the wing's leading edge as well as the nose cap of the orbiter to protect it from the extreme heat of re-entry. Now, this is a really cool place to be because this is the business end of the orbiter, only you really wouldn't want to be here on launch day because there's a lot of things going on. But this is the high-energy end of the orbiter, because what we have located back here are the main engines as well as the orbital maneuvering system and reaction control system jets. Now, right behind me is part of the orbital maneuvering system. That's a very large 6,000-pound thrust engine. We have 2 of those located back here to give the orbiter that tiny extra bit of thrust it needs when we get on orbit in order to keep it up in space. But also located back here are some of the 44 smaller rockets that we need. What you're looking at now are some of the primary reaction control system jets. Those generate somewhere in the neighborhood of 700 pounds of thrust, and they give us pointing and steering ability when we're up in space. But there are also some smaller 25-pound thrusters called verniers that give us some very fine adjustment when we have to do some very small maneuvers up there. Now, the chemicals that we use in the orbital maneuvering system and reaction control system are hypergolic. And here's where I hope to convince you that I am a rocket scientist. What What hypergolic means is these chemicals hate each other. When they touch, they explode. So all we have to do is open two simple valves that allow the monomethyl hydrazine and the nitrogen tetroxide to flow into the combustion chamber, and boom, I have rocket propulsion. A very, very simple system. But the downside of it is it's very, very toxic. Whenever you see people working with these chemicals, you'll see them essentially wearing a spacesuit because it is so dangerous. If they would get a good enough whiff of these chemicals, they're going to the hospital because they could have done some very serious damage to their bodies. Now, also located back here, as I said, are the main engines, the three of them. What you're looking at right here is the hole where main engine number 1 will go when it finally gets installed. Down below me will be the spots for engines 2 and 3. But right above the main engine is the vertical stabilizer. And that white panel you're looking at right there is where the drag chute is located. The drag chute is used upon landing. You'll see that come out, and it helps slow the orbiter down after a space mission. Now, right behind me is the crew module of the orbiter. Specifically, what you see behind me is window 1. The commander would be sitting right behind that blacked out, covered up window that you see right there. There are actually 2 decks inside the crew module area itself. There's the upper deck, or the flight deck, where the commander, the pilot, and 2 mission specialists will sit. Downstairs from them, well below me, there would be 3 or 4 more astronauts when they fly up into orbit. But this is where you want to be, folks, if you're an astronaut, sitting inside this.
If you look at the front of the display that the astronauts are looking at, you'll see the 3 CRTs for the 5 computers that we have on board the orbiter. These 5 computers are running all the time, checking each other. If any one computer gets a different answer than the other computers, that computer is voted out. All the other computers go to tribal council, and he's voted off the island. No, they really do. That one computer will be turned off because he got one bad answer out of the thousands of answers he's calculating every second. That's just the way we work. Our flight rules say that's not an emergency, but we should come home sometime soon. Now, that's just getting the orbiter ready to go fly. If you remember, I talked about other components that we have. The other components are the solid rocket boosters and the external tank.
I'm here inside the Vehicle Assembly Building, or the VAB as we call it. It is the thing around here which dominates the landscape in Central Florida. At 525 feet tall, it is monstrous here inside the building. Now, what happens back in the old Apollo days, we used to build the Saturn V up in here, and at 363 feet tall, when it would roll out to the launch pad, it would just barely clear the doors as it was heading out. But nowadays, we stack the space shuttle inside this building. The way we do that is we build up on top of the mobile launch platform. We'll stack the solid rocket boosters and then add the external tank. Now, the solid rocket boosters are composed of 4 components, and each one of those are called solid rocket motor segments, or SRMs. When we stack those SRMs one by one on top of the other, we can do it left, right, or left, right, right. We've done it both ways. It doesn't matter. But once we've got those solid rocket boosters fully stacked, we're ready for the external tank. The external tank is a huge, empty aluminum tank with a lot of foam around it. Overall, it's 154 feet long, 27.5 feet in diameter. When it's empty, it weighs about 55,000 pounds. But when it's full of 500,000 gallons of hydrogen and oxygen, it weighs 1.5 million pounds. So once we've stacked those boosters, we gently lower that external tank down in between them and attach it in 4 locations with explosive bolts. Now we're ready for the orbiter to be brought in.
We go over to the orbiter processing facility and we get the orbiter out. Whichever one is ready, we put it on the back of this 96-wheel vehicle. We bring it over to the Vehicle Assembly Building where we attach 2 of our cranes to it. We take it from horizontal to vertical, lift it way up high, and then we gently lower it down and attach it to the external tank in 3 locations with explosive bolts. We'll stay in the Vehicle Assembly Building for about 1 week doing all of our preparations before we go out to the launch pad. We're validating all our interfaces and doing some simple checks. Once that's done, we're finally ready to roll out to the pad. This brings me to a point. Right next to the Vehicle Assembly Building is the Launch Control Center, where we have our 4 firing rooms where we can control the launch of the space shuttle.
Right now, I'm located in Firing Room 1 of the Launch Control Center. This is the nerve center for all testing operations that go on with the space shuttle. No matter where the orbiter is, whether it's in the orbiter processing facility, at the pad, in the Vehicle Assembly Building, or even out in California, if there's testing being performed on the orbiter, this is where it's controlled from. These are the consoles where the engineers sit, and especially on launch day. Now, these consoles contain about mid-70s computer technology. I understand that's very old, but to upgrade it would be very expensive. But we understand how the system works, and it's been very reliable for all these years. Now, right up behind me is Management Row. Let's go on up there and have a look. Right now I'm located